My grandpa's turning 90 pretty soon, this May. He just got home from being in the hospital for 18 days, and that's because a lot of different parts of his body are old, starting to shut down, and he's pretty weak. He's back home now, starting recovery. He's got different types of therapy, people coming in to help. We don't know how much longer he has on Earth, though. His death isn't something I enjoy thinking about, but I do know it's coming before too long. As I think of it, I often come back to our passage for this week, 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 17. One should turn over there. I also talked about it a few weeks ago at youth group. So, when you get to that passage, I want you to stop and do 3 things. I want you to read through these verses, 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 17. I want you to think through what they're talking about. And then ask yourselves, what do you like about these verses? And what do they tell us about God? Read through, think through what they're talking about, and ask yourselves what you like and what this shows us about God. Ready? You can pause and go for it. Okay, so if you're not already doing this with your parents, I want you to remember at least one thing that was interesting, that was different, that you never heard before, thought through much before about these verses, this passage, and tell them about it. For me, if I want to do that kind of thing, I've got to write it down because I don't remember that well. So if you need to, write it down. But after this, tell your parents something interesting and different. About these verses, though, these verses give hope. They give the Christian, the believer, hope. We're reminded we have this hope, unlike the rest of the world. And by the way, falling asleep here doesn't mean just took a nap. It's a euphemism. It's another way of saying died, just like we say pass away instead of die. And that's kind of thing. It's time for an ad break, commercial break. I'm going to interrupt here. So I disappeared for a moment to get this book. This is the advertisement, Living by the Book. And it's not only a book, which this is, but it's also a study in Right Now Media. Right Now Media is like Netflix, but for Christian Bible studies, which you all have access to. If you have not taken that access or you're not sure how to get it, let me know. It should have been an invitation through your email, at least through your parents' email. Living by the Book is a way of studying the Bible. It's going through what we go through, the observation, interpretation, correlation, bringing things together, and then application. So I want you to at least check it out. Living by the Book, the series looks like this. There are 2 different options. One that has 7 different lessons, and one that has like 20. So more in depth. Both good, both kind of old, and that's okay. So there's your advertisement. More studying the Bible as you have greater need perhaps to do that on your own and in your own home with your family. Back to our regularly scheduled program, however. Okay, when I talked about this passage with the youth group, we talked about the rapture. Rapture, yes, it's derived from the word in verse 17, caught up, and different kind of translation of that. Jesus is coming back for us. That is our main focus tonight and right now. And that's the name of this lesson, is Jesus is coming back. And that's awesome. And we all know that. We all can agree with that as believers. He's coming back in the same way that he went, in a cloud. Just like the 2 guys in white, we presume angels, in Acts chapter 1. Why don't you take a moment to go over to Acts chapter 1 and look through and see the similarities of that and this passage in 1 Thessalonians. So, and then after you've done that, we've got a few questions to ask ourselves and discuss a little. What if Jesus came back tomorrow? Would you be ready? Would you be more excited or would you be more afraid? Think through those things. And then, for the excited or afraid, why? Then, is this comforting? These verses, maybe especially 4:13 and 4:18. And also look at 1 Corinthians 15. The entire chapter, it's a long chapter, and it's a great chapter. all about the resurrection. And as we're headed toward Easter, which is all about the resurrection, in just a week and a half, we can think through 1 Corinthians 15. So why don't you take it as a challenge? Read that chapter before Easter and have a better understanding of all of it. Cool. Okay. Wrapping up. When my grandpa dies, I'm going to be sad. I've already cried some just thinking about it. He and I are pretty similar in a lot of ways. Though I lived several hours away for most of my life and 10 hours away now, he's in Oklahoma. While I was in college for those 4 years, we lived in the same town, and I'd go and visit them at least every other weekend, sometimes more often. But when his time on earth is done, I won't despair. I'll be sad, but I won't despair because I have hope. He and I will be together again one day, worshiping God in heaven together. Remember verses 17 and 18. At the end of 17, it says, "And so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words." That's what we got to do. Through all this time, we don't need to fear. This is one more confirmation of that. Next week is going to be a little different. Because we've got an extra week because of the spring break that we're not really taking because we're all at home anyway. We have an extra week in the schedule. So I'm going to go through a summary. So the books in the New Testament you're supposed to read and then say a summary of. So I'm going to pick one of those books and then kind of example for you what saying a summary can look like. Now, I know many of you have already done them, but for those who haven't, and for people in the future, this could be pretty helpful. So we're going to do that next time. By the way, feel free to give me a call just to talk or to say a verse. But until next time, fear not and farewell.